Love didn't knock for me with roses and fireworks. It came in a pair of familiar sneakers carrying coffee and a tired smile. This is the true story of how my best friend, the guy who always knew my order, somehow, tenderly became my home. On a quiet American street. If stories like this warm you, subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us keep telling gentle, hopeful love stories. I was halfway through ironing a shirt I didn't need to iron when the doorbell chimed and the smell of autumn followed my friend into my kitchen. He held 2 steaming cups like a waiter who'd graduated summa cum laude from the University of Showing Up when needed. Long before we ever said the word love to each other, he knew exactly how I liked my coffee. Half and half, a little cinnamon on top, and a lid that didn't squeak when I sipped. He had this way of taking care of people that felt like a well-worn quilt. Not elaborate, but warm, exactly where it mattered. "Morning," Henry said, stepping around a canvas tote of apples he'd found on sale. "You're ironing again. Who are you trying to impress, the mailman?" "You laugh," I said. "The mailman has a new route and very kind eyes." Henry rolled his. He set a cup in front of me and opened a paper bag with that modest flourish only he could make charming. 2 blueberry muffins shared a napkin, their tops dusted with sugar like they'd been out in the first snow. That morning was the start, and not the start. If you want to know the truth, we had been starting for years. We were the sort of friends who never needed plotting. We fit like a good song you can't quite believe isn't brand new. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. The way you don't notice spring until your neighbor's lilacs throw open their windows. We grew up on the same block, in a town with more maple trees than stoplights. My mother called our place a comfortable mess. But to be fair, it was more comfortable than mess. Henry lived 2 doors down with his father, who kept a glass jar of nails in the garage the way other men keep a jar of family recipes. We were 10 when we first traded comic books on the curb, sitting with knees crossed, a cereal bowl of pretzels between us. My first clear memory of him is pulling a baseball cap down over his ears because he was convinced it made him invisible to girls who teased him about his freckles. He was a shy kid, a reader, the kind who could fix a leaky faucet before he could drive a car. We grew up in the usual American ways, summers that smelled like cut grass and charcoal, winters that shoved us closer to the fireplace. A yearbook photo where you're sure the cameraman had a grudge. In high school, I learned to play guitar because I thought it would make me interesting. He learned to change his own oil because it saved money and, truth be told, soothed him. By senior year, we were each other's dates to the things that didn't require dates. Wednesday night church dinners. The 4th of July parade, we swore, was the same 5 floats in a loop, and the Friday football games where we booed politely, because that was the way our town did things. Noisy love and quiet disagreements. If this were a movie, we would have kissed under those bleachers and the whole town would have cheered. Only life is not a movie, and I was late for the kind of honesty that sets a person free. Henry had a girlfriend for a while, a sweet girl named Erin who worked at the bakery, and I dated a boy in the next county over, driving 20 miles on a 2-lane road just to hold hands in the safety of someone else's town. We didn't talk about it. We did not talk about it. In those days, the silence was a room we lived in because we hadn't found the door. College scattered us. I went to a state school 2 hours away and learned, to my surprise, that you could be both broke and happy if you had the right friends and a library that didn't close early. Henry stayed home and took a job at the hardware store while he saved for trade school. It suited him knowing where the odd screw was tucked, advising fathers and grandmothers how to sand a splinter out of a stair rail. He liked people most when they didn't think they were being watched. He liked fixing things that could be fixed. We talked every Sunday night. He'd call while stirring chili and tell me about Mrs. Parker, who argued with paint swatches as if they were stubborn teenagers. I'd tell him about the professor who lifted his glasses to stare at us like he was a lighthouse and we were storms. When I finally said the words on a crackling dorm hallway phone that swallowed quarters, I heard the breath he took as if he were about to dive. "I'm gay," I said, in the softest voice because softness felt like respect. I think I always knew it, but now I know it. "Okay," he said, carefully. Not the kind of okay that leaves a bruise, but the kind that closes a door against the wind. "You're still you. Are you safe?" "Do you have good people?" I told him I did. And then he asked how my guitar strings were holding up and whether I remembered the trick to getting them on without slicing my finger. He didn't rush past it, but he didn't make a parade either. He met me where I was, which is what he's always done best. Ears curled and uncurled. I became a teacher, then a counselor, the kind of job that lets you be a steady bench in the park of other people's storms. He finished trade school and opened a small shop, fixing what folks loved too much to throw away. Lamps that lit babies' first nights home, radios that played dances in kitchens, chairs that held grandfathers with stories. He married eventually to a woman named Lisa who liked to bake bread so dense you needed both hands. She was kind to me and kinder to Henry. I went to their wedding in a rented suit and cried quietly, not out of heartbreak, but that heavy, hopeful way you cry when you want someone to have the happy ending a town wrote for them. They had 2 daughters with knees always scraped in summer. I became Uncle Mike, the uncle who brings noisy toys and eats the last slice of pie because he feels guilty about leftovers. We held birthdays in backyards and Thanksgiving potlucks where I was in charge of green beans because no one trusted me with a turkey again after the incident of the undercooked bird. Life was a rhythm, gentle and sure, and we kept time without having to count beats. If there's a hinge, it came in pieces. Life does that, sends the big turning on the back of smaller deliveries. My father died one winter after a long spell of small losses, and grief, put plainly, rearranged my furniture. Henry came over with a toolbox and installed a new handrail in the hallway because my mother was unsteady and the old one wobbled like a loose tooth. When he finished, he sat on the floor by my mother's feet and let her tell stories she hadn't told in 50 years. Laughing where she wanted him to laugh. Quiet where quiet meant love. Months later, after the thaw, his marriage ended the way some marriages do, not with cruelty, but with a truth that had finally lived long enough to be spoken. He and Lisa sat at the kitchen table and acknowledged the goodness they'd built and the fact that their futures, if knit together, wouldn't hold. I was at his house the day the moving truck came. Not because I was particularly helpful with heavy boxes, but because I could keep his daughters busy with a treasure hunt I invented on the spot, sending them to find things I knew would be found one by one. A plastic dinosaur with a broken tail, a book with a yellow ribbon, the winter hat with the pom-pom that always made their father grin. We carried things to different doors and we didn't say the word divorce out loud. We said pizza and dog hair and remember when you tried to paint the ceiling without taping? And somehow that held us together while we gently folded our lives into new drawers. He moved 3 blocks away, into an old duplex with wide windowsills perfect for plants. He hated cooking for one, and I was not particularly good at it, so we did it together, most nights. Tuesday became pot roast for reasons neither of us could defend. We watched old movies and new weather, compared the forecasts that never agreed, and learned the names of the squirrels who visited my porch like uninvited cousins. The girls, kids are resilient and also very honest, asked if their dad was sad. I told them everyone holds sad and glad in the same cup sometimes, and the trick is learning how to sip without spilling. If you're listening at home, you might be wondering when the moment came. I was wondering, too, even as the moment threaded itself gently through our ordinary days. One evening in late October, we went to the football game because the marching band was playing a tribute to a teacher who'd retired. And we both have a soft spot for anyone who willingly teaches teenagers how to hold a trumpet politely. We sat under a blanket that smelled faintly of my laundry detergent, and Henry kept his hands tucked sleeves deep. Halftime came. The band moved across the field, careful steps making pictures we could see only from above. In the pause between songs, a lone trumpet carried a tune I didn't recognize at first. It was the kind of music that vibrates the top of your chest. I turned to say something and found Henry watching me instead of the field. I didn't know what my face was saying until he reached across and put his warm hand on my knee, the way you place your palm on the back of a chair you know will hold. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And yet there it was, this solid, simple touch that announced a truth we had both been circling like kids on bicycles learning how to ride without hands. He didn't let go until the crowd erupted for the next number. That fun. Happy song that tells you people know how to celebrate in between tears. We walked home through a neighborhood that smelled like fireplaces and dry leaves. Quiet in the way good company makes quiet. At my porch, under a porch light that flickered in a comical strobe I kept promising to fix, he looked at me for a long time. The kind of look that is a question and also an answer. "It's okay to say it," I whispered, surprised by my own bravery. "We don't have to fix it tonight, but it's okay to say it." "I'm scared," he said, almost smiling, because honest fear is a kind of courage. "I don't want to lose my best friend." "Me either," I said. "But I don't want to pretend either. I think I've been in love with you for a long time. The kind that waits in a spare room, quietly doing crosswords, patient as a cat in the sun." He laughed at my cat in the sun, as I knew he would, and then he took my hand. He didn't squeeze hard. He didn't put on a show. He simply held it the way you hold a handle on a bus when the road is bumpy, steady, trusting that the driver knows the way. Somewhere on our block, a screen door shut, and someone's television announced a ball game score. We stood there under the grumpy light and let our fingers learn a new language they must have been practicing all along, quietly, in the background. Let me tell you something I learned that night. And that night felt like it ran all winter, as if the calendar had pledged allegiance to our courage. Falling in love when you're no longer 20 doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like a porch light left on for you even when you're running late. It feels like the steady adjustment of a thermostat you don't have to ask for. It feels like being seen by someone who knows where you leave your shoes and loves you for trying to break the habit and failing half the time. We didn't rush. The next week, we went to the diner at the edge of town, where the coffee tastes like memory, and the owners have a daughter named Grace, who writes her name in a loop you can recognize from the parking lot. We sat in a corner booth and read the specials as if the answer to our question might be in meatloaf. We talked openly as men learning a new honesty we hadn't been taught to practice. He told me he had always leaned toward men and women both, that his heart had room he hadn't walked around in yet. I told him the shape of my love was stubborn and loyal, sometimes to my own surprise, that I wanted a slow dance more than a chase. Grace brought pancakes big enough to cover the state of Nebraska. "You two look like you solved something," she said, and I don't think she knew how right she was. We didn't kiss in the diner. We asked instead harder questions. Could we do this kindly? Could we do this without pretending to be anyone else? Could we take his daughter's and my mother's comfort into account and still give ourselves a risky, joyful chance? He took a napkin and wrote 3 words: gentle, honest, patient. We passed the napkin back and forth as if we were signing something rare. We folded it into his wallet. It's still there, years later, soft at the edges, the ink smudged and faithful. When we finally kissed, it wasn't the first time, even though it was. Our lives had prepared 1,000 small welcome mats. It was a Tuesday, which felt right because Tuesday is an ordinary day, not fancy enough to make you nervous. We had just finished washing dishes, a small and complete intimacy I recommend to anyone who wants to entirely understand another person's patience. I was drying a mixing bowl, and he was inexplicably polishing a wooden spoon. And I made some joke about senior prom dances and what I would pay to tell my 17-year-old self that he'd be okay. Henry set the spoon down like it was valuable. He wiped his hands on that soft dish towel my sister swears is a $10 miracle. He stepped close enough that I could smell the cinnamon he pretends he doesn't like in his coffee, and his hands found my shoulders like they were familiar furniture. His kiss was not dramatic or teenage. It was measured and kind, the way you pour hot soup into a bowl you don't want to crack. I closed my eyes and found myself smiling, which is not how I expected to be when the thing I feared and wanted finally arrived. We didn't say much afterward. He leaned his forehead against mine, and we breathed like we'd run to get somewhere we didn't know we could go. "We'll take care," he murmured, and I nodded. That became the promise we made each other, the one we still make in big and small ways. We will take care. Of this, of us, of the girls. Of the mornings when the world barges in with its loud voice, and the nights when old fears knock. Introducing new love into old life is not a casual rearrangement. We were gentle with all our circles. He spoke with Lisa, who had moved on in gracious ways the world rarely notices. She listened. She asked good questions. She looked tired in a way all mothers do on Tuesdays. And then she said, "I want you both to be happy and kind. The girls will take their cues from us." I sent flowers without a card because sometimes the truest message is a quiet thank you. We spoke with the girls one Sunday afternoon. They sat at the counter eating apple slices with peanut butter and pretzels pushed in to make hedgehogs, a snack Henry invented when he needed to make boredom delicious. We kept it simple, the way you talk to people who can see right through to your heart. Daddy loves Mike. Mike loves Daddy. We will take care. Your family is bigger, not smaller. They asked if we'd all go to the Christmas lights in the park, the drive-through kind where you can play carols and argue about which display is trying too hard. We promised we would. They asked who would make pancakes. We said both of us, and that seemed to settle most of their theology. If neighbors raised their eyebrows, they did it in their own kitchens, which is where eyebrows belong. Our town has always known the difference between gossip and curiosity, and the older I get, the more I'm grateful for that line. Some folks were openly delighted, the kind of people who collect happiness like seashells, turning it over and holding it up so others can see the shine. Some were cautious, which is reasonable, because most of us have touched love and been burned. But I will tell you this, walking down Main Street with someone you're not apologizing for feels like deep rest. We learned a new routine without breaking the old one. We still fixed leaky faucets for neighbors because Henry cannot not fix things that drip. We still made far too much soup and brought it to anyone who needed dinner and a nap. We added small rituals that feel like vows every time we keep them. Saturday mornings, we sit at the kitchen table with his old radio playing a station that seems to have only 6 songs, and we do the crossword in pencil. He saves me the clues about movie directors and American history. I save him the ones about tools and trees. When we get stuck, we laugh and fill in something obviously wrong just to keep moving, promising to come back later, which is not a bad way to do most things. We adopted a dog more by accident than design. A neighbor's cousin needed a home for a beagle with a distinguished gray face and a bark that sounded like a creaky screen door. We named him Buddy because some names just name themselves. Buddy only likes 3 people, and we are 2 of them, which feels like an honor we didn't earn. He sleeps between us when thunderstorms roll through, and I pretend he's not scared so I can pat his back without making it a spectacle. Our first big test came on a summer night when the heat was like a stubborn thought. My mother woke with a pain that didn't have the courtesy to explain itself, and a kind paramedic named Rita talked me through our options with a calm that deserves a statue. At the hospital, under fluorescent lights that make everyone look a little ghostly, Henry sat in a chair too small for his kindness and reminded me to drink water. He knows that when I'm scared, I forget small things like my own body. He held my hand when the doctor said, "It's complicated," and then drew a diagram that made less sense than a Sunday night football replay. If you want to know how you love someone, watch how you behave toward them when you are tired and cannot fix what's most important. Watch how you wait with them. Mom came home with a list of instructions that made our fridge look like a classroom bulletin board. We made her soup mild enough for the cautious and watched game shows at volumes a teenager would protest. She told Henry stories I'd never heard, about the time I insisted on bringing a stuffed rabbit to the first day of kindergarten and introduced him to everyone as if he were my agent. She told him about the day I learned to ride a bike and refused to take off the training wheels for an extra month because I loved the sound they made. He listened like a son. He tucked a blanket under her knees like a nurse. He made a joke about how I still require training wheels when it comes to change, and she nearly spit out her tea, which had always been our goal, make each other laugh at the point where sorrow and love meet. Moving in together was less an event than a slow migration of objects that had already chosen a side. His favorite chair arrived first, with the dent in the cushion exactly where his shoulder belongs. My books slowly claimed more shelves than I had the right to. We painted one wall a color called spring wheat because the paint company has a poet on payroll, and we stood back and pretended to see the difference. We argued gently about which pots actually needed to be kept. He let us keep 2 more than he wanted because he has patience for my sentimental streak, and I let go of a box of cords even though I was convinced one of them belonged to something vital. He is tidy in the way of someone who knows where things go. I am tidy in bursts with flair and noises. We meet in the middle. On our first shared morning, we marked our coffee cups with a black permanent marker because we were not about to invest our love with a fight over whose cup went where. We ate toast with too much butter because sometimes indulgence is a vow, too. We promised to tell each other when we were overwhelmed. We promised to tell each other when we needed silence. It is a relief to be so obvious with someone you trust. I am cranky today because my knee hurts and I missed my father. I need 10 minutes to not be everything for everyone, including you. I love you even when I'm quiet. We didn't become young again. We became ourselves more deeply at the age we are, with knees that pop on the stairs and vocabulary for our fears. We didn't camp out in the thrill. We furnished our lives with a steadiness that is its own kind of romance. Some nights we sit on the porch and make small bets about who on the block will walk by next, as if we are two old men, which by most measures we are, narrating our own gentle neighborhood show. Some nights we dance in the kitchen to Sam Cooke while the dog looks at us like we've lost a specific screw. We eat too many peaches in August and complain about the price of raspberries and buy them anyway because living isn't always practical. People ask, occasionally and politely, how it is to find love with someone who knew you at your worst, who saw you in your high school haircut in your lowest days. The truth is, it's a gift, the kind you don't get a receipt for. I don't have to pretend I'm not afraid of storms. He doesn't have to pretend he doesn't cry when his daughters head back to their mothers for the week. We saw each other make mistakes and kept showing up anyway. It's not that there are no surprises. It's that the surprises are less about who we are at the core and more about the small habits we can learn to enjoy. He leaves shoes wherever he lands. I leave books stacked in unwise towers. He watches baseball like it's a prayer. I talk through movies, aware and unrepentant. We told our wider families with the same approach we took everywhere, gently, honestly, patiently. My sister hugged us both and said, "I knew you were each other's favorite years ago." His mother, a woman who ironed dish towels for reasons we never understood, asked if we were warm enough at night and whether we needed another blanket. Uncle Roy asked if the Bears were ever going to get a decent quarterback, because in our family, that question marks a blessing. We brought deviled eggs to barbecues, the kind with relish that make opinions strong, and people went home full. I took him back to places that made me. The community college where I learned to listen, the park where I once practiced guitar until a kid on a scooter applauded me for finally getting the chord change right. He took me to the lake where he used to sit in his truck after late shifts, listening to the world wind down. We dotted the map of our history with new flags. We made new rituals for holidays that can be hard. The anniversary of my father's passing marked with a cake and a story I hadn't told yet. The day his marriage ended honored by taking his daughters to a movie and buying the big popcorn without a fight. We built small outward things together, too. A raised garden bed that grew tomatoes like they had ambitions. A bookshelf we never quite finished because we kept reading on the floor. We volunteered Saturdays at the senior center, fixing leaky faucets and replacing batteries in smoke alarms and playing gin rummy with a man named Walt, who cheats because he can't see properly, and we let him. Old men should win more often than not. We became the kind of pair people call when their bathroom fan sounds like a helicopter or when they need to borrow a ladder and a dose of patience. We answered, and we meant it. It wasn't all dear hearts and fiddle-faddle, as my grandmother would say. We had hard days. Old fears don't vanish. They exchanged coats. There were nights when he went to sleep early and left me with a quiet that made me ache for the safety of our first Sunday night phone calls. There were mornings when I wanted our love to fix the world and resented it for not having a superpower cape. There were times when his daughters came home sad and we couldn't patch everything, and I had to learn the hokey, hard art of making enough pancakes for heartbreak, which is an art, and also a miracle if you keep at it. One autumn, after a storm that threw branches like confetti across town, we drove out to a farm stand that sells cider donuts and throws pumpkins into the back of your car like they've known you all your life. The sun made a soft fuss over the trees. Henry watched the light as if it were a movie you wait all year to see. "I thought there was only one story for me," he said, voice mild as the day. "I thought my job was to keep everyone else steady and ignore the parts of me that wanted something different. And now?" I asked. "And now," he said, laughing softly, "I'm grateful I was wrong. I didn't know love could feel like this. Like I can breathe more deeply than the room allows. Like I still get to learn. We drove home quietly because quiet is the way you honor certain sentences. Later that night, we sat out back with a blanket wrapped around both of us like a very small, very polite tent. He leaned his head on my shoulder and I kissed the place where his hair goes from summer to winter. The dog snored and the neighbor's wind chimes had a lot to say. I whispered thank you for what I cannot name to no one in particular, which is my favorite prayer. Sometimes I wish I could hand that napkin from the diner to everyone who asks me what changed. Gentle, honest, patient. It still lives in his wallet, waiting its turn to be remembered. That napkin taught me to hold the moment, to speak plainly, to forgive the days I am less brave than my best hopes. If you're at a kitchen table wondering whether the person across from you is your future, I can't promise you our ending. I can't promise you an easy road or neighbors with good manners. I can tell you about the morning I woke to find Henry standing at the stove in his oldest t-shirt, flipping pancakes and humming John Prine off-key. I can tell you about the way he says my name in the slow voice that means stay, not because I need you, but because I want you. I can tell you we still hold hands like we are both new to it, because gratitude should always make you a little inexperienced. Last Christmas, his daughters, taller now, opinions as big as their hearts, made us a photo book with captions in neat, bossy handwriting. On the inside cover, they wrote, "We love you. Thank you for showing us that love can be brave and soft at the same time." We passed the book back and forth until the dog got jealous. We put it on the coffee table next to a bowl of peppermint candies our dentist does not approve of. Sometimes I catch him looking at it in the morning light, his face soft the way it gets when he is past thinking and squarely in remembering. Those are the moments you want to bottle, and you can't. And so you just learn to notice. On our anniversary, which we count from that Tuesday dishwashing kiss, we went back to the diner. Grace, older now, with a baby on her hip, brought us pancakes and said she'd told the new kids how we always sat in the corner booth and waited until the second cup of coffee to mention the big things. We laughed and did exactly as we always have. We talked about leaks and whether we should finally fix the porch light that insists on making a scene. We held our promises up to the light, gentle, honest, patient, and saw that they still fit. Even better with wear. We paid the bill and left too big a tip because we've both learned to be generous in all the small ways we can afford. Outside, Main Street was putting on its evening shirt. We stood on the sidewalk like we owned it, which is another way of saying we belonged. A couple we know from the senior center waved, and a boy on a bike who could not have been more than 10 called out, "Nice shoes, Mr. H." Henry pretended to take a bow. I pretended not to swoon, which will never not be hilarious. Walking home, he reached for my hand. The air was that soft kind you can only describe by saying you wish you had more sweaters like it. He squeezed once, twice, the old code we made up in high school for you, okay, and yes, I squeezed back, and the night answered with the kind of hush that means favor, if you know the sound. Back in our kitchen, the light over the sink hummed like an old uncle telling a joke. He took out 2 mugs and handed me the one with the faded cardinal because he is still the man who remembers the small preferences that make a person feel held. We stood there a long time, leaning against the counter, letting the day land. Sometimes you don't need fireworks or speeches. You need a place to lean. You need someone who will hand you the right mug. When people ask me what surprised me most about loving my best friend, because that is what he was first, and I am grateful for the order, I say this. The way joy finds room in your bones you didn't know you had. The way laughter comes even on days it ought not be able to find a way in. The way the old songs on the radio sound less like nostalgia and more like a map, one you didn't know how to read until now. I have learned to stop looking for the big signs and to trust the small ones. If he reaches for my hand in the grocery store aisle between the peanut butter and the cereal, that is a vow. If he buys the good honey because he knows I am an extravagant bee, that is a vow. If we argue about the correct way to load a dishwasher, I am right. But I am willing to be wrong, and then we laugh because it feels very lucky to have such a manageable disagreement. That is a vow. Maybe you're listening to this with a cup of coffee cooling too fast. Or maybe you're walking the dog and hoping you don't run into the neighbor who likes to talk about politics before breakfast. Maybe you're a person trying to make sense of a heart that only learned one song and is starting to hum another. Maybe you're older than you imagined you'd be when you finally came home to yourself. I am here to tell you, it's not too late to find the hand you were always meant to hold, even if it's been there all along, offering you muffins on an ordinary morning. We kept our promise. We took care. We took care on the day my mother slipped away, with the radio playing low and Buddy asleep on her feet, the way he did whenever she visited. We took care when his daughter got her driver's license and we both aged 5 years in an afternoon. We took care the first time we held hands in church and the second time when we didn't think to notice. We took care the afternoon he fixed the porch light for good. When he flipped the switch and the bulb came on steady as a heartbeat, we stood under it and grinned like grand fools. And if you ever find yourself on our block around supper time, you might see 2 men in a kitchen, one stirring, one singing, both smiling at a dog smart enough to lie exactly where they need to step. You might think they have always been this way. We haven't, but we have always been walking toward it even before we knew the name. I have learned that the heart has a good memory for home. And sometimes, if you're lucky, home is the person who once brought you coffee and a blueberry muffin and stood at your stove asking if your iron was warming up. Love didn't knock for us with roses and fireworks. It came like a neighbor arriving at your door with a casserole and a plan to fix the squeaky hinge and a laugh that knows where you keep the sugar. It came dressed like friendship and stayed until we finally noticed it was wearing the shirt we'd been saving for special occasions. We let it in. We washed the dish. We put the napkin back in the wallet. We turned off the porch light because we were already inside, safe, together, home.